Redditors who considered once joining the military, but never did. What made you not go forward with the decision? Sometime in the early 70s, I was working in a small hamburger joint. Noticed two guys in army fatigues coming through the drive-thru. I went running up to the window and was like, hey, you guys are in the army? I'm fixing to join the army too. Got about a 5-minute lecture about how stupid I was if I did, how they fucking hated it, and how if I liked being told what to do all the time to go ahead, but otherwise not to. I called the recruiter the next day and told him I changed my mind. I'm a Navy veteran, and I can tell you made the right choice. It has nothing to do my own service. I found it to be a good experience. You made the right choice for you because you had the maturity to look past something superficial and listen to what you were being told. Army recruiters love to let potential recruits try on the uniform, see what it feels like. It's all about promoting a desire to want to be a soldier, but ignore what it means to be in the army. I think the military is a great choice for some people, but it 100% is not for everyone. Recruiters target seniors in high school who have no plan after graduation, don't have alternatives in the community that are desirable, and want to wear a uniform. Believe me, I know it feels good. Walking around Philadelphia after the Army/Navy game in the mid-2000s when Navy was on roll, I couldn't pay for drink or a meal in my dress blues. No one knew all the things I had to give up for it. I missed holidays. I delayed settling down, delayed my career somewhat. For me it made sense because of what I gained. It's not for everyone. I took some entrance test for the Navy when I was still in high school. The recruiter said he could get me anywhere in the world working as a machinist and not on a boat if I didn't want to be. My father, a Vietnam vet, forbade it and said absolutely not. My dad was a Korean War vet and basically said not the army and don't go in as an enlisted man. Eyes weren't good enough to be a pilot, although I got those certs as a civilian. I have an eye condition that disqualified me. Recruiter told me to just not mention it. Then the recruiter acted all mad and surprised when I couldn't pass the vision test. Gotta make that quota at all costs apparently. Recruiters are notoriously unethical. My dad was not a fan, and he was in for 20 years. Hell, before I joined the army I considered the Navy. Had a recruiter come by to give me information. He picked me up for lunch and an hour later we were at MEPS. When I said I wasn't ready, just wanted some info, he got pissed and drove me home immediately. Never spoke a word on the way home. In the military you are essentially required to do what is known as a B-billet. If you want to boost your fit rep and increase your chances of being selected as a RET/NCO. Some people are forced out of the military because they cannot pick up E6 before a certain time and date. You will be doing a B-billet. A lot of times you do not even have a choice. Needs of the Marine Corps. The three options we had when I were in were drill instructor, combat instructor, recruiter. It was unanimously agreed that recruiter was the worst of these three and one that nobody volunteered for. Some people get a bad luck of the draw, and their entire careers depend upon them being able to meet their enlistment quota. Someone who could have been top tier in their given MOs, but got fucked by the big green weenie. If they don't meet that quota it reflects as a poor fit rep, and those are a tough task to recover from. People would purposefully try to fail out of the recruiter courses that would be easier to recover from the negative fit reps from not hitting quota. It does lead to crazy unethical moves though, as people just want to survive and get back to their regular MOs. Not sure why I'm commenting this at all, just adding insight. Getting diagnosed with depression. The military prefers to give soldiers its own brand lol. The Marine Corps let me in with depression and anxiety. I was literally afraid to walk in front of PPL, and they were like cool. Glad to report I'm no longer afraid to walk in front of PPL. Just can't sleep near them, or trust them, or allow loud noises or let them wake me up, but walking by them is fine. Totes cured. When I was about 18 I wanted to join the Air Force, thought it'd be awesome to be a pilot. The recruiter told me that it was impossible with my terrible eyesight. I was very nearsighted and wore glasses. He tried to sell me on the idea of joining anyhow, told me there was plenty of other stuff I could do, even if I couldn't be a pilot, but that was the end of the dream for me. Because the US military will basically own you for the whole time you're there, and a couple years after. The lack of free agency is what convinced me not to do it. I had a couple colleagues who were Air Force and Army JAG who were really pushing me to apply for Air Force JAG for the experience. My experience made me a strong candidate, and a lot of the possible work locations would be near where I live now. But my wife has her own career and makes more than me. I couldn't justify the benefit of the experience against the risk of us having to move to Bumblefuck Air Base for 3 years, where her job doesn't exist. I'll stick with the civilian world, where my boss won't tell me to move to Oklahoma, but if they did, I could tell them to fuck off and find a new job. I'm a woman and didn't want to get raped. The same reason can be applied to men. Good reason not to join. The current statistic in the Navy is 1 in 5 women will be sexually assaulted during their naval service, and what's also crazy is when looking at total numbers of sexual assaults, greater than half are male on male. By a pretty good margin too, like 2/3 or 3/4. So even though there are more males being assaulted, it's a lot lower proportion of the whole. So for some reason, stigma, lack of care, etc., male on male sexual assault isn't taken seriously. Not that the military is taking male on female assault seriously at all. They are just not taking any sexual assault seriously. There's no way I'd join as a woman if there was a 20% chance of me getting sexually assaulted. At 17 I looked into getting my GED, dropping out of high school, and joining the Marines. The Marine recruiter had all kinds of helpful advice. The only reason I didn't take this option was because I'd need a legal guardian's signature to do it, and mom would never go for it. Then they started closing bases in 89, 90, and when I turned 18, I bumped into my recruiter, and he gave me the bad news. The Marines wouldn't take me with astigmatisms in both eyes because of their changed recruiting goals. The next year, the recruiter called me at home and told me they changed the vision requirements back, but by this time I had a job and a girl, so I politely declined. I considered joining for totally selfish reasons that had nothing to do with serving my country. I saw the military as a free way to get far away from my abusive household. I also saw it as a way to give some structure and purpose to my meaningless life, learn some skills, since part of the abuse was infantilizing me and denying me the opportunity to learn basic adult life skills and give myself some sort of future. I decided not to because I was very weak and unfit, and even at my peak in my late teens I could only do a couple push-ups and sprint a few hundred feet. Also, I would break down into panicked tears if someone yelled at me. I thought I'd probably end up either having a heart attack or committing suicide before I even finished basic training. It had been a year since I broke up with my high school sweetheart, and I felt lost. Thought the Navy might give me a good change. I started training MMA to get in shape for boot camp and really did a lot to boost my confidence. Started making friends with the guys I trained with. Through one of them met a girl that made me think maybe sticking around, finishing my bachelor's, and seeing where this goes might not be so bad. A month before I'm supposed to go to boot camp I tell my recruiter I changed my mind. 2 weeks later she tells me she met someone who she felt she could be serious with. She was only with me for the sex. Life took me in a few odd directions after that, but I'm in a good place. Kept training MMA. Those guys are as good as brothers to me now. I was almost talked into it, since it would give my life some direction and help me get out of my dead-end small town, but I stopped when I realized I would very likely wind up murdering a ton of scared teenagers so I could go to college. Something I realized right off the bat was that the ones most enthusiastically recommending it to me had either never seen combat or had seen it and were basically neo-Nazis who liked to brag about how many filthy ragheads they had put in the ground. The only branch I had any hope of joining would be the Air Force. If there's anything I'd learned from reading extensively on the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, and what was at the time the initial stuff happening in Iraq and Afghanistan, there's a big chance I would either directly or indirectly be bombing civilian airports to establish no-fly zones, or leveling a city block on the off chance an insurgent was there. Something about sending a Hellfire missile into a family of four's car and turning them into screaming, burnt meat all because I had trouble finding myself as a young adult came off as unappealing. And honestly, I kind of felt like shit for considering it. Edit. Also, as you can probably tell, my general attitude wouldn't have sat well. I would have been fine with the training and all the stuff like that and wanted the extra money. But honestly, it's just a waste of the best years of your life. You miss out on everything going on at home. Almost impossible to start a relationship. And if you want to go to college, then you'll be 2 to 3 years behind all your friends. A lot of people who don't go into college right after HS find it hard to ever go. I talked to recruiters and all that. Finally realized how much more I wanted with my life. Rather than sweeping the floors and doing grunt work. I still think about signing up and going in as an officer, but I'd rather be at home every night with me engineering job's salary. I'm not willing to die for a country that refuses to even try to help its people, but as a teenager it seemed like a cool idea. Learning skills, free college, travel. I had a friend 2 years ahead of me that graduated and enlisted right out the gate and got deployed in Afghanistan. He came back when I was about to graduate. He told us a story about how he had to shot and kill a 10-year-old boy because the boy was throwing hand grenades at his squad. Didn't seem very appealing after that. Honestly, my recruiter changed my mind. My family and friends were all opposed to me going, but I still went as far as taking the ASVAB. My recruiter had driven me to the testing facility, and on the drive back, while discussing my scores, he told me that someone with scores like mine should go to college first, if I could afford it. It caught me by surprise and I ended up taking his advice, but I never ended up joining after that. I was the first male in generations not to go into the military in my family. My father was killed in Nam 11 days before I was born, and just when I was old enough and thinking about the possibility of joining, Desert Storm started. So I figured I'd break the cycle and go to college instead. Plus, I don't deal with authority or people barking orders at me. Some people need that structure and discipline in their lives. I decided I didn't. My friend was going to join the Marines. He ended up backing out because a month before going to boot camp he fell in love with a girl. My sister was going to join the Air Force, but because she had a thyroid problem she was denied. No, you're supposed to fall in love with a stripper immediately after you finish boot camp. He got it backwards. I kept testing positive for weed. After third test the recruiter just gave up. Found out years later my oldest sister was lacing the cookies she gave me because she was scared I might get killed while deployed. Kind of glad she did, because I was just joining. Because my best friend was joining, he got killed on his first deployment. Edit. Yes, she drugged me, but me being the youngest and only male in our immediate family, I understand why. She basically raised me cause my mom being a single mother sometimes worked up to 3 jobs. I hold no grudge against her, especially after seeing how bad she felt she didn't do the same for Ike. Edit too. Guys, your awards are appreciated, but unless it's the free ones given by Reddit, your money will be better spent being donated to a good cause. Doesn't have to be military related. Animal shelters can use some donations. I got recruited by the US Army into a test program where I would spend 2 years in college with tuition covered and a stipend. After 2 years, I would be rolled into basic training and go from there to finish college. Signed the papers, went through maps, and though everything was good, my recruiter gets transferred to another station and they assign me to a new guy. I started at the university and I have monthly workout meetings with my new recruiter. Months go by, no money for tuition or stipend have come in. Recruiter says he is looking into. The year goes by, no money still. The head recruiter says that he is going to take me on personally and apologizes for the army losing me in the system. Decided that was a sign and I exited the program. Since they never gave me anything, I didn't owe them anything. But I always wondered if things would have been different if I had still had my original recruiter. Weirdly, he was in a town 40 minutes from the university, which was the same distance the new guy had to drive. I was 17 and had graduated high school. I didn't want to go to college, so I was recruited by the Navy. I even bought a study guide and took the ASVAB test. It took a few months of talking to the recruiter, and he was waiting for me to turn 18, which would have been in November, and this was around August. This was in 1989. I'm old. Recruiter promised me I would go to Florida for basic, home for 2 weeks, then on to Texas to go to school for nursing. Then I would get to go to one of my top 3 choices to be stationed. I had to pick ones with hospitals. Women weren't allowed on ships or in combat during that time. He promised a few other things. I was excited to go. Then I told my older brother who was away at college. He got upset and tried to talk me out of it. He then made me a deal, since I wasn't listening to him. He said when I talked to the recruiter, to have him put all his promises in writing and sign it. If he doesn't, then I have to promise not to join. So naive me figured the recruiter would do it. He wouldn't promise me things he couldn't deliver. The next time I met with him, I told him what my brother said. He basically said he can't do that, and only the president could sign something like that. So I told him to get the president's signature or I can't go. I walked out and never looked back. For a few years I got recruitment calls and letters from all the armed forces. I'm glad I didn't go. Not real sure about now, but back in 1989 time frame, I'm old too, joined the Navy around that time. You got a contract for a specific set of initial training only, and it always had stipulations like successful completion of the previous school, etc. So, you should have had a contract that said after basic training was complete you would go to your school, hospital corpsman. After you completed that it may have stated you get another school if your grades were good, specialty like pharmacy. Otherwise the thing they dangled in front of you was that the order you got to talk to the detailer, some sailor in your specialty that now hands out assignments, was based on class standing, so you really wanted to finish top of your class. The choice of 3 was that they would only ask you for those 3, but the needs of the Navy would always trump your choices. If you wanted 1, hospital in Virginia, 2, hospital on the East Coast, 3, hospital on the Gulf Coast, and they had a need for bodies at a hospital in Hawaii, you were going to Hawaii. I just threw out some locations here, nothing specific. So, after the wall of text, your recruiter was doing you dirty by talking in half-truths, like they tend to do to hook you. By the time I managed to finish my degree, a requirement of OTS, I'd had cancer, lost a kidney, and was thus medically disqualified. Sorry to hear it. I hope everything is going smooth now. My girlfriend is super similar. She has had multiple tumors from her leg to her jaw, and has one in her breast right now. She also has GI issues, her back broke a few years ago, anxiety issues, and she's very skinny. Too skinny for any part test that no amount of working out would fix. The recruiter was ready to put her into the Marines, but thankfully an army recruiter talked her out of it because of her medical history. I really wanted to join the Coast Guard. I lived in middle of nowhere Kansas and I wanted to get as far away as possible. Plus I loved boats and lakes and the ocean. This was 1998 or so. I told my gym teacher in my junior year I wanted to sign up and asked if she could help me prepare for basic because she was ex-military of some kind. She said I was too fat and if I couldn't do a dozen push-ups her training me would be a waste of her time. She was a bitch. I thought I was fat 4 years after that, but I look at the pictures from the 90s and I was maybe a size large. Definitely not too fat for basic. It wouldn't have been fun but not impossible. How scummy the recruiters are. Figured if you have to lie to people to get them to enlist then the job itself can't possibly be that great. When I was in my early 20s, I was working at a drugstore. I had recruiters approach me while I was at work, working in an aisle. I was not interested and was actively trying to get into nursing school. I basically told them to scram. The sad thing is, I had some MLM scheme person also try to recruit me while I was ringing up her purchase, to the point she was setting up an interview for me. When I googled the place after work, I knew exactly what it was. A good friend who is a few years older than me was in the 101st Airborne, had been stationed in Korea during the late 90s/2000, gave me some advice that I'm pretty happy I followed. I had 2 years of free community college thanks to some A+ program from high school, so he said, while I would likely excel in the army, go take advantage of the free college, get my associates, and then reassess how I felt about joining, and go from there. It just happened that during those 2 years at community college, I met a gorgeous girl and fell in love, married now for 14 years, together for 18, and decided I didn't want to leave her for the military. Thinking back, Had I joined right after graduation, May 2001, just 4 months before 9/11 and all the war that followed, it kind of freaks me out how differently my life could have gone.